Deliberately devalues and destroys the value of the currency. It will destroy the middle class.
When Republican presidential candidate Texas Congressman Ron Paul railed against the Federal Reserve, he got big applause from growing crowds.
We don't have the money. They run out of borrowing power. Guess what they do? You would have never guessed. They start printing money.
Despite Paul's and other criticism, the Fed has acted even more aggressively. Just last week, doubling down on previous commitments to keep buying billions of dollars of government treasuries, printing more money each month to keep interest rates low for the foreseeable future.
Exceptionally low levels for the federal funds rate are likely to be warranted at least through mid-2015.
Why are they doing it? Let's go back to the national debt clock. Remember, we were staring at it earlier in our series as it ticked well past $16.3 trillion. As it stands now, compared to the U.S. economy, the debt to GDP, or gross domestic product ratio, is almost at 102%, the highest since just after World War II. And that's with extremely and historically low interest rates. Even at these rates, that interest will cost the U.S. more and more every year. $222 billion in interest payments on the debt this year, $570 billion by 2022. At current rates.
I mean, this stuff is no joke. So we have this big interest in keeping these interest payments low, and also, incidentally, in keeping interest payments low so that other parts of the economy can continue to function, or function as well as they can under the vaguely recessionary circumstances.
Because for decades, across the country, across the economy, we have essentially put things on a credit card, borrowed to buy, leveraged up. Every sector has done it. Now that credit market debt, by the broadest measure possible, is way out of proportion with our economy. For a look at where our country stands, let's take a look at the ratio of our credit market debt to GDP, the gross domestic product, really the best way to measure our economy overall. Over the past 7 decades outlined on this chart, that ratio has steadily increased, with a high of 370% in 2010, downward slightly to 350% in 2012. Now, as you look at this chart, all the different colors are different sectors of the economy. You can look at the different sectors. On the bottom, there is government. Then you have GSEs. Those are Fannie and Freddie. Households, corporate, financials. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, you can see all of it was tightly compressed all together. There wasn't a lot of borrowing. But then the country started getting leveraged, and you can see the mountains start to climb. By the 80s, 90s, into 2000, you can see the separation and then the climb all the way to 2012 at 350%. Economists say the country is over-leveraged. So if interest rates rise even slightly, all of these sectors may have a hard time paying the bills. Former Democratic Senator Evan Bayh.
Servicing the debt is hard now. This is with interest rates at record lows. God forbid something should happen to cause interest rates to go up just a little back to where they ordinarily would be. The burden of this debt will become immensely greater and start taking away from everything else. And so, unfortunately, as tough as this is, we ain't seen nothing yet, because interest rates eventually are going to go up.
Economist John Taylor.
If your interest rate goes from 2% to 4%, it really doubles the amount that you have to pay on a given amount of debt. And with the debt so high, that's a lot of money.
Economist Robert Janetsky.
The problems, when they come, will appear very rapidly. Once that increase starts, it's going to be very difficult to contain it. That's why, while we have the rates down, while things are under control, this is the time to implement more positive policies. Unfortunately, so far I haven't seen any inclination to move in that direction.
Alice Rivlin, budget director for President Bill Clinton.
Our debt is rising in relation to the economy, and we owe about half of it to other countries. So if our foreign creditors, not to mention our domestic creditors, lose confidence in us, then we're in deep, deep trouble because interest rates could go up rapidly. That's going to affect everybody. People who buy houses, people who buy cars, people, businesses who want to invest. Borrowing money would get gradually or suddenly very, very expensive, and that can destroy American prosperity. There's a lot at stake here.
Which brings us back to the Federal Reserve. Since 2007, to further reduce long-term rates, the Fed has amassed more than $2 trillion in government debt and mortgage-backed securities, printing money. And it's now the third round of what's called quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing basically means that they're injecting money into the money supply. They're buying all sorts of securities in exchange for adding more to the money supply. Under ordinary circumstances, that would fuel inflation. Right now it's not, and we're sort of counting on it never fueling inflation. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at history, sooner or later inflation is going to come around. And when inflation comes around, that really hits the American people very hard. And it usually comes when you don't expect it. And you look back and you say, oh, we should have changed policy a year ago, but now it's too late. The people it's going to hurt are seniors on a fixed income that are living off their savings. Suddenly their savings are not going to be worth very much. Young people that are trying to get a start, they're going to find that anything that they will have saved for their future will be worth a lot less. It'll be ordinary people, working people, poor people that are really going to suffer when finally this inflation comes around that we're playing with. It's really playing with fire.
It is scary, and frankly, a lot of people call it depressing. Tomorrow, in our final